Good evening, folks. And again, we're back with Robert Brown this evening. So if you'll give me just a moment, I will start the recording and we shall proceed with the Freedom Talk. And Grant, you made it. And hello, Doug. So again, Robert Brown, our favorite Constitution guy, is back again tonight. And we're going to talk about a little bit of a story of jury duty, and then we're going to get into more of the argument, or I should say, the argument against the Convention of States and the lies that a certain gentleman keeps spouting and then contradicting himself constantly. So give me a moment. We'll start the recording and we'll start the show.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
And we're back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much for joining me. As a big thank you to everyone who watches on the live stream on YouTube, listens to me on the radio, KEYK and MO Liberty Radio, and also whoever downloads from Spreaker. So podcast, radio, YouTube, however you get this podcast, however you get this fantastical show, I appreciate each and every one of you who support me. Before I begin with Mr. Brown here, I want to let everybody know, especially in the local audience here, because KEYK unfortunately won't get this for another week or two. This coming Monday, March the 20th, is is a rally at the Capitol, and this is promoting the SAFE Act, and that is a bill in the Senate which was laid down right before spring break, and I don't want to go into too much detail because everyone will be infuriated. But there's going to be a rally at the Capitol on Monday. Our very own Catherine Dreher will be there in support of this bill, which stops these butcher surgeries, these transgender surgeries on children here in the state of Missouri. Again, very important bill. We need to get this done. Unfortunately, we have to do this. We shouldn't even have to do this type of thing. We shouldn't have to spend our energy and our efforts into promoting something like this because it should be common sense. And yes, Catherine will be speaking on why libertarians should support the SAFE Act. And it's not just libertarians. It should be everybody with more than two brain cells to rub together. But March the 20th, at the Capitol, at the Rotunda, there will be a rally in support of the SAFE Act. If you're able to make it there, I would suggest that you do, because I'm sure they will be visiting the Senate and speaking to all the senators and to push this bill through and get it to the House. The bill also stops puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones on children. All vitally important things to stop. Things that are malignant, horrific, and other things, other words that I can't say on the radio, that are being done to children. We want to see that blocked. So remember, March 20th at the Capitol. Go see Catherine Dreher. Go meet up with her and show your support for her, because she is a true fighter for liberty. You know, she's been on my show several times. Catherine is active in her state, in this state of Missouri, to make it the most freest state in the nation. So don't forget about that, folks. If you can make it, please, please do. And without further ado, before I bring Robert up, I just want to describe how I feel about Robert. And I don't want to seem like creepy or like a stalker. But when I talk to Robert, I feel like I wish Robert and I lived in much closer vicinity so that we could just meet up, have a cup of coffee, and talk about the founding fathers and the founding documents and talk about the U.S. history, because, I could have probably several people on here that know this stuff, but Robert makes it more fun and enjoyable to listen to. So, Robert, how are you doing this evening, good sir?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on. So, again, Robert has some videos. I'm screwing around trying to get Skype to work with this, and somehow I didn't get it right. So the description is not finished. I will finalize it after we're done. And I will put links to a Rumble video that Robert has up on nullification, and then his YouTube series, The Constitution is the Solution. I will link to those videos, and if you have not watched them yet, I suggest that you do because they are fantastic. So, Robert, I guess to start off, you wanted to talk about your, some jury duty that you did here not too long ago?
Yeah, it was a few years ago.
Okay.
And really the reason I wanted to share this was it taught a really important lesson I've referred back to several times since then. We're in a jury trial. The defendant trying to defend himself as being innocent on certain charges and so on. And honestly, the prosecution and defense had done a fabulous job. And when it came time for the jury to meet together, deliberate, look over all the evidence, and make our decision, we went into that with no idea how we were going to conclude that day. And as we started digging through all the information, we found that one piece of evidence brought forward, one statement from the defendant clearly contradicted something he'd said on another occasion in his defense. It was very clear that he was not telling us the truth. And when I pointed that out to the rest of the jury, the conclusion was, wow, if this guy is willing to lie under oath in a jury trial on one thing, we really can't trust anything else he has said. And at that point, when we put all of his testimony aside and just looked at all the rest of the evidence, it suddenly painted a very clear picture, and the answer was very easy for the jury to come to. The reason I share that is when you discover that somebody is intentionally, knowingly, blatantly lying about something, we need to disregard their testimony as unreliable in anything. And that's kind of the theme for today, is that as I've looked deeper and deeper into claims from a certain person, we'll get into details here, the more lies I find. In fact, the first audio clip we'll go to here in just a moment, in 33 seconds, I count 5 blatant lies. And I don't know if that's a world record or something, but that's amazing to me. Because at first blush, I noticed one. And then I looked a little closer and checked a few references and things. Oh, there's another one, and another one, and then another one, and another one. I just was floored. And this is not just a one-time occurrence for this individual. This is something that happens all the time. So, and this is on the topic we've spoken on in your show before, those pushing for the Article 5 Convention, sometimes known as a Constitutional Convention or Convention of States. The one that's the most prominent, most well-funded, and to its credit, the most well-organized, is the organization called Convention of States, run by Mark Meckler. Mark Meckler has amazed me at his ability to tell absolutely blatant falsehoods consistently, repeatedly, and in this case, what I think may be a world record of 5 blatant lies in 33 seconds. I'm still just reeling over that. I'm just amazed. Because literally this morning I woke up and thought, there's 2 lies there. Oh, wait, there's 3. And then this afternoon, there's 4 and 5. And I just kept finding more. So I'm going to just start off. Let's give a little bit of background of this topic and kind of what's going on here. And we'll get into this a little further. So the Article 5 Convention of States, whatever you want to call it, is a movement from the left and from the right, different groups on both sides, pushing for this idea that when the state legislature apply to Congress for a convention, once you get up to 34 states applying for a convention, then Congress calls a convention for proposing amendments, changes to the U.S. Constitution. And from there, that's where we get into the really interesting what one side says versus what the other side says. Because on their side, they say, don't worry, this will be totally safe because we can limit the convention to just a few specific amendment proposals and nothing else can be on the table. And then it will have to go out to the states for ratification, and ratification requires 3/4 of the states, which should be 38. So nothing could possibly go wrong. That's all their reassurances with this. And what I find is virtually every important claim they make, I find there are a lot of falsehoods behind them, almost every time. And it's astounding. So I'm going to start off with this. The first clip, this actually came from a couple of weeks ago, February 20th, in Iowa. Prominent radio host there, Simon Conway, is interviewing Mark Meckler. And let's go ahead and roll audio clip 1 if we can get that one to roll.
Yeah, here we go.
Why is there so much opposition to this, Mark? Because, right here in Iowa, this is where we sit, the two Republican National Committee people hate this idea.
I'm going to say, honestly, I don't know, because when they say they hate this idea, they're standing side by side, literally, and this is going to sound outrageous, with every single leftist organization in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. They all signed a press release saying this is the worst thing that could happen to the progressive movement. When I say that, I want to name some names. It's Common Cause. It's Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. It's George Soros. It's La Raza. It's MoveOn.org. It's Daily Cause. So when you hear those committee people say that they're against this, they're standing with all of those organizations.
Okay. So that was 33 seconds. And at first blush, I noticed what? That when he says every single leftist organization in the United States of America, they all signed a press release, I'm thinking that's quite out. As he said, this is going to sound outrageous. I agree. That's an outrageous claim, because there's got to be a few leftist organizations here and there in my local community that didn't sign it. There's got to be thousands of leftist organizations all over the country. He's saying every single leftist organization, they all signed this press release. So just basic logic, that can't be true. And when I actually pull up the press release, there's a little over 200 that did sign the press release. So is 200 every single leftist organization in the country? Not even close. Not even close. In fact, I found another list of over 700 leftist organizations signing an endorsement supporting the idea of having a convention. So that's more than a 3-to-1 ratio of leftist organizations that we've found that support a convention versus those that oppose it. So not only is he wrong on every single leftist organization, he's not even right on it being a majority. So that was the first blatant lie. Every single leftist organization in the United States of America. But at first blush, I missed several others. The first thing he said, I think this is hilarious, is he says, I'm going to say honestly that I don't know, referring to I don't know why they oppose this. You mean to tell me that after 8 years of doing committee hearings in state legislatures, hearing the pros and cons, hearing people come in there expressing why they oppose this, he still doesn't have any idea why people are opposing this? And again, that's absolutely absurd. He knows exactly why they oppose this. And in this case, they were speaking of two specific Republican committee persons from the state of Iowa. And he knows exactly why they oppose it. They voiced their positions many times, even directly to him. I've seen in personal conversations, one of those two committee persons talking to him directly, expressing their concern. So when he says, I'm going to honestly say I don't know why they oppose this, is that true or is that false? Maybe he's senile. I don't know. Maybe he's totally forgotten. Doesn't know anything that happened yesterday, let alone a year ago. I mean, that's the only possibility here. He's blatantly lying about that, too. And in fact, just a couple of weeks later, he's on Mark Levin's show, and he goes into a lot of details of why they oppose it. So even that is not even close to true. So there's two blatant lies already. And then we go to the next section in the same sentence after he says every single leftist organization, they all signed this press release. He then says what this press release says, saying this is the worst thing that could happen to the progressive movement. I read that press release, and there's nothing remotely close to that in there. what it talks about in their press release is the concern of opening up the Constitution to significant changes could threaten our constitutionally protected rights, like our freedom of speech and freedom of religion and things of that nature. They go into those types of things. They mention nothing about it being the worst thing that could happen to the progressive movement. Blatant lie number 3. And then number 4 and 5, he then concludes with saying, and when I say that, I want to name some names. It's Common Cause. It's Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. It's George Soros. Wait a minute. George Soros didn't sign that press release. You look at the press release, his name is not on there. In fact, George Soros has never made any public statement that I'm aware of for or against the convention, yet he funds organizations on both sides. He funds organizations that are supporting it, and he funds organizations that are opposing it. So anyone that says they know where he stands on this, I think, is probably stretching the truth, to say it nicely. But then he continues to name 3 more. La Raza, yes, they were on the list. Daily Kos is on the list. And then he also mentions MoveOn.org. But wait a minute, they're not on the list either. And in fact, MoveOn.org is on the other list I mentioned, the one that says we endorse the idea of having an Article 5 convention. So he missed on 2 of the 6 that he claims is on that list of the press release having signed it. So that's 2 more lies. So we have here 5 blatant lies. And if we pull up another time, 12 other times where he just made the same claim, the list of organizations that he says signs this change from time to time. Last time I saw him say he included Code Pink as one of the groups he claims has signed this press release saying this is the worst thing that could happen to the progressive movement. Code Pink was not on that list either. Code Pink is on the other list. They're on the list that endorses a convention. So I can't say in 33 seconds that was a 6th lie, but that's one he's often used in this same context. So at least 5. So I don't know if anyone out there has beat that number, 5 blatant lies in 33 seconds, but I have to say that is really impressive, whether it's a world record or not.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and to me, when I listened to the clip, my first thought was, wow, he's just gaslighting. He's doing the thing that we accuse the left side of the aisle and the media and everything else. He's doing the exact same thing we accuse them of doing all the time. When you throw, anybody that opposes this is just like a lefty, and I'm like, that's a pretty low standard to go to when you're trying to. I mean, you're pulling out all the stops to convince people if they don't back this up that there's some kind of, loony lefty.
Radical leftist.
Yeah, and now the thing is, a lot of the shows that he gets invited to are supposed, these people are like Mark Levin's supposed to be some constitutional expert. But when you talk to you and what's his name from the 10th Amendment Center, both say Levin's awful on the Constitution. He doesn't know squat. So when he's talking to these people, he fits right in with that group. But when he talks to people that know a little more, then his views are completely off the wall, and well, like you said, just a whole lot of lying going on. And it doesn't surprise me though, Robert, not the least bit when they when he pulls things like this, because again, the time that he was live streaming on YouTube and I went in there and I said something and some of the people jumped all over me and Robert Brown's a liar and Robert Brown, that's all they could say. They could not point out where you were lying. It was just, you were a liar. And I'm like, well, where is he lying? And then no more comments. So I'm like, oh, you have no idea. You're just saying that because you're on this guy's side. Okay. That's cool, I guess.
Yeah. Now, fair is fair. I call Mark Meckler a liar. He calls me a liar. That's great. We both call each other a liar. But I'm willing to say, hey, let's go toe-to-toe in a public forum. I'll lay out the things that I claim you're lying about, and you're welcome to answer them. And vice versa. You bring out the things you claim I'm lying about, and I'll answer them. And let's see where that lays. Let's see where that falls once we're done. Who's actually the one that's exposed as a liar? I actually invited him to do that. I ran into him in the state capitol last year, state capitol of Iowa. It was February, about 21st, somewhere in that range. And in the hallway, is probably the only time I'm actually going to do any kind of a semi-public debate with Mark Meckler. We just got talking in the hallway. A friend of mine starts videoing it with their phone, and so I do have a recording of this. There's so much background noise. I would have brought that on today too, but it's really hard to pick out the audio. But one of the things that's funny is in this case, he says the exact same thing we just heard him saying, that you're standing side by side with all these leftist organizations, including Common Cause and Soros, MoveOn.org and Code Pink and all that. And when he's done saying that, I said, it's funny because 3-1, I've found more leftist organizations that support a convention than oppose it. Well over 700 leftist organizations have endorsed having a convention. His response to me was, name one that supports us. Name one that supports what we're doing. I said, okay, how about The Nation magazine? They published an article a couple of years ago, specifically mentioned the Convention of States Organization and encouraging leftists to support you and your agenda to call a convention. They specifically endorsed you. And at that moment, he turned away from me and started talking to somebody else. Wouldn't even answer. It's hilarious. I'll have to see if I can find someone who's got some good software to clean up background noise, because there's a lot of background talking and all that, but it was just so hilarious that he knew exactly what I was talking about and didn't want to go there. So this is interesting. As I've been going through a lot of the things that he's been saying, and I see this again and again and again, the closer you look, the more lies you find. It got me wondering. I'm not a psychologist. Actually, my father is. I had to talk to him about this. But the term pathological liar came to my mind. I'm just wondering, could he be fitting that description, that definition? I looked up the definition of pathological liar, and it says it's an individual who chronically tells grandiose lies that may stretch or exceed the limits of believability. Okay, I think we've got that so far. While most people lie or at least bend the truth occasionally, pathological liars do so habitually.
Nailed it.
I think this totally qualifies. Again, I'm not a psychologist. I can't give any kind of a formal diagnosis here, but I don't see how this doesn't fit the description of what he is consistently doing. And I've got so many more clips we could share. I have a few that I've shared with you today that we can continue on listening to today, but there's so much more. It's amazing to me how, and I don't know if you've ever known someone who was a pathological liar. I have. At one time, they told me a story where they were talking to someone, they just made up stuff and totally lied to them about it. And they said, I don't even know why I did it. It just came to my head and I said it. Don't know why. It didn't matter at all if I told them the truth or not. I just said it. It just comes out. They have no idea why they can't help themselves. It was really interesting. I'm beginning to suspect this may be what we're dealing with here.
Well, I mean, he seems like a guy that just wants to be relevant. He wants to be in control of something. I mean, we see this personality type in government all the time. They want to be relevant, and they there's a power. If he can convince enough states to do this, he has some kind of power. So it's almost like he's, I don't know, maybe he's a little narcissistic. I'm not sure, but he definitely wants to be relevant and wants to be one of those power brokers in this whole thing without even, maybe he knows the damage he could do, or maybe he is in denial. But I don't want the guy. Here's what I wish, Robert. I wish I could trick the man into coming on with me and not telling him you were on the other line, and then do a three-way call and go, start the show and go, I'm joined by Mark Meckler and Robert Brown, and see if he just hangs up. That's probably what he'd do. He'd probably, you didn't tell me, click, and hang up. Like, oh, that didn't work out.
It would be fun.
It would be.
I would love to. Hey, let's play a few clips. So here's some of the things you said. Do you stand by that? Because we've got some questions about it.
Oh, yeah. That would be a treat.
Wow. Yeah. One other thing when I ran into him in the state capitol in Iowa was I did talk about debating me. The Montana Senate leadership had recently sent him a certified letter inviting him to publicly debate me in the Montana Senate chambers. And he flatly refused. I said, I look forward to the day you have enough courage to debate me in public. And his answer was, that will never happen. Okay, I understand. I want to jump into a few more because these are just amazing. The next set, I think I've shared these on your show before. We won't go into these in a lot of depth. But in order for him to keep his charade going, there are certain things he has to maintain, certain claims that he cannot ever admit the truth on. And by the way, I was going to side note mention, whether or not he ever gets his convention, last we saw on their tax records, he is bringing into the Meckler household about $500,000 per year just from the convention stage project. They have other branches as well, so I'm not sure what his total is. But there's maybe some financial incentive there as well. $500,000 a year, pretty good money. I think most of us could live on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some interesting things behind what's going on there. Maybe he's totally not motivated by the money. It's totally purely just about whatever else. Trying to give any benefit of the doubt we can here. I want to jump into the next section here, which is the precedent. Because remember, we talked about their promise is the state can totally control this convention, limit it to one amendment or a few amendments that they pre-approve. You can propose amendments for a balanced budget or term limits or whatever, and they can't talk about anything else. As we look to historical precedent, this is where they cannot ever concede ground, because if they do, Meckler's $500,000 a year might disappear, might dry up. Because what happened, the only time we've ever had a national convention like this, where we've made changes to our national constitution, was when we actually didn't have a national constitution at the time. We had a federal constitution, the Articles of Confederation. And as we well know, in 1787, they changed that to a completely new form of government. The Articles of Confederation, strictly federal. The federal government had no actual enforcement power of the state. And they changed that to a national government with national enforcement power over the state. Totally different form of government. And as we look at what their commissions were authorizing them to do, this is the next audio clip we'll get to here. Mark Meckler initially correctly points to their commissions as the authority they are operating under. But then what he says about those commissions is where it gets interesting. So if we can, let's jump to audio clip number 2.
Okay.
The greatest authority on the subject is Madison, who was at the 1787 convention himself and wrote in Federalist 40, if we want to know what the authority of the founders, of the framers actually was, look to their commissions. And this is important. I've read all of their commissions. The commissions are the documents that the people bring to the convention that says what their authority is. And you allege that 1787 ran away. I would ask you the question, and it's a critical question, have you read those commissions?
7 of the commissioners, the first 7 states to call the convention, had this language in their commissions that said the commissioners have any and all authority necessary to render the federal constitution adequate for the exigencies of the Union.
And because his underlying premise was 1787 convention was a runaway convention. It's, the premise is the whole thing ran away. That's actually just a lie and a slander against the founders. Here's the deal. He hasn't read the commissions of the delegates who went to that convention. All of them, except for one, had this language in it. The commissioner has any and all authority necessary to render the federal constitution adequate for the exigencies of the Union.
Okay. So those are 3 separate clips back to back. The first one, he's absolutely right. You want to know what their authority was? Look to their commissions. That's exactly what Madison said. I agree. And then what he says the commissions contain, the 2 other clips, the first one was from, again, that same radio host out of Iowa, Simon Conway. This is back in 2018. He says the first 7 states to call the convention had this language in their commission. And so when I read their commissions, I expect the following that he's about to say. I'm going to find that language in their commissions, right? When he says, had this language in their commissions, he says, the commissioners have any and all authority necessary. That's a broad grant of power, isn't it? Now, then he contradicts himself on the next clip. Here he is in Idaho with Nate Shellman in Boise, Idaho, 2020. In this case, he says all of them except for one. Now, last time he was saying 7 states had this language in their commissions. Now he's saying all of them except for one had this language in it. And again, he says the commissioner has any and all authority necessary. So he's not consistent with himself. Maybe he just hadn't read the rest of them yet and didn't know that it's not 7, it's really 11. I don't know. But of course, the first question then comes in, So which one is it? Is it 7 states that have that language in their commission? Is it 11 states that gave this broad grant of any and all authority necessary? And the answer is, well, you know, it's actually not either of those. It's not 7 and it's not 11, because there are 12 states. All of them except for one would be 11 states. But it's not either of those. I've read those commissions, and the language that the commissioner has any and all authority necessary appears in exactly 0 of them. Not one. He made up that language. And if you have any convention of state supporters out there, I'm going to offer a little challenge here to you. Show me even one of their commissions that say the commissioners have, and he said they have this language in there, so I expect you should find that language. Any and all authority necessary. Either it's in there or it's not. And similarly, on our previous slides, he said either George Soros signed that press release or he did not. Either MoveOn.org did or they did not. This is very clear, cut and dry, black and white. Either he's lying or he's not. And if he's lying, there's a big problem here. And so we'll continue on here. But what Mark Beck was trying to do, what's his motivation here? Is he's trying to make it seem like when the convention in 1787 totally replaced our form of government with a new constitution, new form of government, that they were fully authorized to do so. This wasn't a runaway convention, so we don't need to worry about any precedent for a runaway convention to happen again today. Totally false. The founders themselves admitted they'd overstepped their bounds, but they felt it was necessary to do so. And we won't spend the time today to go into all those details, but we can certainly do so anytime you'd like. I've done many interviews and many presentations going into a lot of detail. Over a dozen of founders quote saying that very thing, that they felt it was necessary to overstep the limits of power their states gave them. So if we have a convention today and they give them limits of power and they say, hey, look what they did last time, they simply overstepped their bounds, we can do the same. That's the precedent. And then the other aspect of it was ratification. Because remember, he talked about, don't worry, we can limit the convention to a few limited amendment proposals, and then whatever they come up with has to be ratified by 3/4 of the state. So that's our final safeguard. That's part of their assurance this is a state process. Well, what was that ratification safeguard back in 1787? If you read the Articles of Confederation, Article 13 says, the Articles of Confederation shall be inviolably observed by every state. Every state has to abide by them. And then it says, nor shall any alteration at any time hereafter be made in them, unless such alteration be agreed to in Congress of the United States and be afterwards confirmed by the legislatures of every state. So what does that say? The Articles of Confederation is perpetual. It's going to last forever. Every state needs to observe it, and it cannot be changed unless how many states? Needs to be confirmed by the legislatures of every state. It also mentions Congress has to agree to it as well. That's pretty clear, isn't it? So there were 13 states at the time. It would require 13 out of 13 states approving whatever changes to the Articles of Confederation happen. That's really pretty clear. And in fact, on that note, obviously that's a lot higher bar than we have today. That's a much bigger safety net against things coming out of the convention that weren't approved. And regarding this fact, Madison said in one particular, it's admitted the convention has departed from the tenor of their commission. He says, instead of reporting a plan requiring confirmation of the legislatures of all the states, they've reported a plan which is to be confirmed by the people, carried into effect by 9 states only. So Madison's admitting they departed from their commission when they changed the ratification process. It was supposed to be every state legislature approved and Congress. They took it away from Congress. They took it away from the state legislatures entirely. As he said, it's to be confirmed by the people, not Congress, not the state legislatures, and only 9 states, not 13. So they changed the ratification process, and he admits they departed from the tenor of their commission. Now, I just mentioned that was a requirement in the Articles of Confederation, their constitution at the time. Just like today, we have a ratification process in our current constitution. a lower bar, but still similar. It's only 3/4 of the states today. But they just threw it away and created a new ratification process. But he also said they departed from their commissions because 9 of the state commissions reiterated the requirement of the Constitution, reminded their delegates that this is the standard. You still have to send it back to Congress and the state legislatures for approval, whatever changes you make. So again, they violated their commissions in that way as well. So this question came up to Mark Meckler on another radio show just, again, a few years ago. And what did he say about this? This amazed me. Because there's no question what the Articles of Confederation requirement was. It required every state to ratify. Let's jump to audio clip number 3 and see how he answers this charge of, hey, they violated their commission in changing the ratification process. They ignored Article 13 requirement of every state ratifying. Let's hear clip number 3, how he answers this.
Wasn't the original plan in terms of ratification of changes supposed to be unanimous by all of the 13 colonies, and then they changed it to only 9?
Yeah, actually, that's not the case. And interestingly, I just did a deep dive on the Articles of Confederation because I was really interested in that question. And nowhere in the Articles does it actually say that. What it says is any change to the laws of the country, not the Articles itself, have to be unanimous. So it actually was not a unanimous provision.
Wow.
Ooh.
That's all I can say is, wow. Are you kidding me? You catch what he said there? Oh, that's not what the Articles of Confederation said. It said that, let's see, I have the exact quote of what he said here. I just did a deep dive into the Articles of Confederation because I was really interested in that question, and nowhere in the Articles does it actually say that. No, we actually just read that, didn't we? We just read Article 13 of the Articles says exactly that it was all 13 state legislatures need to approve. And he goes on to claim that what it says is any changes to the laws of the country, not the Articles itself, have to be unanimous. How did he get away with this? And again, to any convention of state supporters out there, either this is true or this is false. There's no gray area here. Go read Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation and tell me if what it's saying is, oh, this is only unanimous consent to change laws. It had nothing to do with changing of the Articles of Confederation. Either Mark Meckler is blatantly lying or I am. And this was really easy to determine. Try me on this. This is the one. And I have to say, this is the one that's so outrageous, it brought to my mind this idea of a pathological liar. Why would he even say that? That's astounding to me. That I don't know what more to say on that. I'm floored.
Well, I mean, it's either one of two things. Either he hasn't read them, or he's flat out lying. And I'm going to say maybe he hasn't gone into the depth that he says he has. That could be part of it. But, yeah, I think he's trying to make himself relevant. He wants this convention of states. Again, as you said, he's bringing in at least $500,000 a year. You know, he doesn't want that money drying up. He doesn't want people going around tearing down his cause and causing that gravy train to go dry. So, and again, now, I'm not a constitutional expert. I don't know the Articles of Confederation. Now, I did download an Audible version of the Federalist Papers, and I have been listening to them. But now, if he came on my show,
that's hard to listen to.
It is, but it's one of those things that's like you got to do it. At some point I'm doing between that and I'm going through the entire Missouri State Constitution, highlighting all the things that interest me, which I found a couple. I got to get with my friend Tom Martz and ask him about a couple things, but I've been doing those on and off because I try not to go full tilt because I've been warned you'll burn out. So I've been taking my time and going through them. But if he's going on these shows and talking to people who don't have this knowledge, so it's easy for him to pass these lies on. which is why he
That's
won't
it.
debate somebody who's against it that knows the material, because they'll completely shred his arguments. So he's going to
That's
the
exactly
place
right.
that makes it easy for him to spread this propaganda. And God help us if enough people fall for this, because I'd hate to see the consequences. Hey, just offhand, real quick, I know that Bill Mundhausen, that runs KEYK, had contacted me, and I sent you his email address a while back. Did you ever get in contact with him?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I did not reach him, and then kind of forgot about that afterwards. So I'll have to see if I can reach him again. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, okay.
He's one of those that thinks this is a great idea. And when we talk about people that have fallen for this con job, if you put some words on it here, obviously Mark Meckler is out there pushing this con. Some people like to call it the con of the con, Constitutional Convention con.
Triple
But
con.
there's unfortunately there are a lot of very prominent names that have been deceived by this. And when Mark Meckler is out there making these claims, you give him there's only two options. Either he isn't familiar with this stuff and he doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's hoping you don't. And I think we're pretty clearly the latter. That he's hoping his audience doesn't know that when he lies about what Article 13, the Articles of Confederation, says, that nobody knows that he's lying to. That when he says, have you read their commissions? Their commissions have this language in it, that nobody's read their commission. But then there's me that comes along and says, yeah, I've read those commissions. Yes, I've read Article 13. And yes, I can name one organization that's a leftist group, like you asked me to, that has endorsed your organization specifically. And that's why he doesn't want to debate, is when the truth comes to light, he's exposed. But he has been successful in getting endorsements from so many prominent conservative leaders around the country that it's time to call him out as maybe the term pathological liar. I'm hesitant to use that because I'm not a psychologist. But he is blatantly lying. It's unquestionable he is habitually and blatantly lying in an outrageous form. Perfectly fits the definition of pathological liar. And most recently, he's deceived people like, fortunately, Glenn Beck got off the bandwagon with him, but Mark Levin has been on the bandwagon for a long time with him. I have a lot of issues with Mark Levin as a phony, as you've mentioned as well. But the list of prominent people on their endorsement list it's frankly, it's embarrassing that all these people that are supposedly great conservative, constitutionally leaning, prominent leaders in our country aren't seeing through these lies, that they haven't done their homework, that they haven't looked into and what's behind the claims he's making. And again, it leaves the two questions of either they are ignorant or they're hoping the American public is. And that's a question I think we need to ask every one of them. Most recent one that really saddened me was Tucker Carlson. Had Mark Meckler on his show and praised him and asking, gee, this sounds great. I don't know why anyone would support him. I'd be happy to tell you if you'd let me on the air, because the evidence is irrefutable.
Yeah.
And so, really, we need to call out every conservative leader in the country that has endorsed the convention and find out, are they deceived or are they intentionally deceiving, being part of it?
Well, he's
Sorry, go ahead.
no, you're fine. He's acting a lot like politicians, where a lot of these conservative and liberal both love to quote the Constitution when they're trying to get something done, like the General Welfare Clause or the Supremacy Clause, totally taking it out of context, flat out lying. But there's no one in, if you're having a White House press briefing, or there's some kind of press briefing going on and they spout this stuff off, there's not one single journalist in that crowd or any other person that goes, excuse me, sir, I read those articles and I read those papers and you're incorrect. You're lying, or you misread, but you clearly got the information wrong. So they get to go on, they get to blurt these clauses out or whatever, and no one's there to raise their hand and go, I don't know how much you had to drink today, but that's not right.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, good Lord.
Interesting. You know, I have to share a follow-up to part of the story I was telling you a moment ago when I said that I ran into Mark Meckler at the Iowa State Capitol last year, and I challenged him, look forward to when you have enough courage to stand up and debate me in public, and he said that will never happen. It was not more than just over 2 weeks later that he sends out an email attacking state legislators in South Dakota entitled "Coward, Disgusting Cowards." And then he goes on to say, in a sickening display of cowardice, South Dakota legislature has refused to even debate this issue. I'm thinking, you mean just like you refused to debate me? You're calling them disgusting cowards for refusing to debate the Article 5 Convention application, just like Mark Meckler refuses to debate. The irony there is just amazing. I love it. But you can see why he refuses to debate. When we lay out the things he's actually saying, and when you have the evidence to counter it, who wants to be on stage in that position? To be publicly outed as a, again, potentially pathological liar. It's amazing to me.
I mean, yeah, because if it happens in one place and that spreads across the country, essentially, unless he goes to a leftist state that, supports it, he can go there. But anywhere where it's a majority conservative, he's done. He's ruined.
Yeah.
And
one time when we get some videos out there, we start spreading them all over the country. Happens one time, it's over.
Yeah.
I want to get into when Glenn Beck last September. It's just a few days before Constitution Day in September, where he came out as, I'm no longer supporting this convention of states. And as a side note, I don't know if Glenn Beck was being paid anything for his endorsement, but we do know the convention of states does do that sometimes. At least some of their endorsements are paid endorsements. In particular, we know that they did a fundraiser to raise, I think it was like 2.2 million, because they knew that that was the amount that they had to come up with to get to even talk to Rush Limbaugh for him to consider endorsing them, was if they brought a couple $1 million plus to the table as the pay for endorsing them. And then Rush Limbaugh did decline anyway.
Oh.
So I don't know if Glenn Beck was being paid or not. I don't know if Hannity, Levin, Tucker Carlson, I don't know if money's changing hands on any of those. I do know money's changed hands in the tune of about $250,000 of people like Jim DeMint that was promoting them. I know right now that they've got Rick Santorum out there. He won't admit how much he's being paid, but he does admit he's being paid. Probably similar to what they're paying DeMint and Tom Coburn, which is around $250,000 a year. But with that background, this radio show that Glenn Beck was doing last September, I have to give the context because I don't want to make it sound like something it's not. Because clip number 4 that we're going to go to here in just a moment, he's talking about liars. And I think this perfectly fits with what we're talking about today. But the context of this is he had just listed several prominent Democrats making certain claims that were obviously lies to anyone that had any even short-term memory of what had just happened previously and so on. So in that context, he's talking about liars. And I want to play that because I do feel what he said there perfectly fits with what we're talking about today.
All right, here we go.
There's a problem. I've been thinking, and not a problem with the country. There's a problem with you. If you're voting for known liars, if you're accepting these incredible lies, there's a problem with you, and you got to stop. You got to stop.
True.
And I would apply that to Mark Levin. I would apply that to Sean Hannity. I would apply that to Tucker Carlson. I'd apply that to, and the list goes on and on, so many well-known conservative names. But there's a problem with you if you're supporting known liars. And I'm calling them out on this. That it's time for them to either turn their back on Mark Meckler and publicly call him out and distance themselves from him as a known liar, or to admit they're part of it. Because if they don't call him out, they're part of the lie. Now, ironically, without anything more than about a half a second breath from what Glenn Beck just said, there's not a single word transitioning from that to what comes next. He went directly from that to clip number 5. I don't know if there's connection there in his mind, but he goes directly into saying, I no longer support. You want to go ahead and play clip 5?
Yeah, here we go.
I have been a supporter of the Article 5 Convention of States. I've been a pretty big supporter, vocal supporter. I'm reversing that today because after some real thought and prayer, we are not the people to open up this sacred document. We are not the people. That was a God-inspired document. That was divinely written, and you can read it from I don't know how many founders. Benjamin Franklin even said that. The very hand of God was involved in the writing of that document. Do you believe that we could send delegates to a convention today that would have that kind of inspiration, that when they got to an impasse, somebody would be there like Ben Franklin that would say, let's pause and all go to church and pray? And they didn't politic, they prayed. I am not for opening that Constitution anymore.
He's got a point. I mean, that's a hard point to call down, because if you look around today in society, how are you going to pick delegates? I mean, because of the government fool system or public schools, however you want to word it, what people are taught.
Indoctrination centers.
Yeah, all that. You can't. How can you know that even if your state legislatures pick delegates, that those people are educated enough on the Constitution and the history therein to not go and do dumb things? I got to bring up something, because years ago, Ron Paul's co-host on his Liberty Report, Daniel McAdams, he got kicked off of Twitter because Hannity was on the air talking about something, and then Daniel got on Twitter and said something about what Hannity was talking about, but he's wearing a CIA pin on his lapel. He goes, that's retarded. And then they kicked him off Twitter for saying that. But that's the type of people that we're talking about. We talk about the Hannitys and Levins. They go and talk about a limited government and the Constitution and all that, but they're wearing like CIA or FBI pins on their lapel and all this. It's like, dude, you are really just splitting yourself in two, going two different directions, and you're not making any sense. Good Lord. Again, how can we believe people that do that? That say one thing, but then you look and they're wearing pins or they're writing a book, and they're just crossing their thoughts out because they're polar opposites, and you're like, now wait a dang minute. I mean, for Sean Hannity, for one, when the COVID hysteria was going full tilt, he was on there like, just go get your shot, and I'm like, really, Mr. Hannity? Wow. Really, dude? Come on, Mr. Small Government, get government out of your life. Well, I think this vaccine's good, and I think, if you want to get it, you should go get it. And I'm thinking, dude, really? Come on. Again, now I never had any respect for the guy anyway, because listening to his show, these hosts talk in certain ways that stir up the people on the right. And they don't. Yeah. Those people listening aren't putting thought. They're regurgitating what the Hannitys and Levins and everything are saying. They're not forming their own opinions, and for the most part, maybe a few of them do, but most of them don't. Same way on the left. So you can't expect too much out of people like these guys, but at the same point, it's like, good grief. Now, Robert, I got a little under 2 minutes, and then I got to cut for KEYK,
Sure.
and then we can go on. So if you got like a brief statement you want to make, and then I'll cut, and we'll continue on the conversation.
Oh, wow.
I know it's hard to do, right?
When it comes to, yeah, it is. When it comes to people like Levin, and maybe we can pick this up again after the break, but with Levin, he's constantly on the show calling out and attacking neocons, but he never defines the term. And the reason he never defines the term is just based on people that are supposedly conservative that he disagrees with. But there's actually a definition to what a neocon is, and maybe we can pick that up after the break here. Because when you look at the definition of a neocon, he fits.
Yeah.
He actually is supporting the neocon agenda while calling out neocons as the enemy on his show. There's a good reason he never defines what a neocon is.
Yeah, I mean, it is true. I mean, these guys throw around terminology, but they do act in the same way at times. They do gaslight a little bit, or they like to lump everybody. If you're not with them, then you're against them and all this. It's not, don't be a free and independent thinker. Think like me and regurgitate my thoughts and opinions and buy my books and go on. So for those of you in the KEYK audience, thanks again for joining me this week. Next week will be Representative Cherie Tolson Reich, and the following week will be Representative Tony Lavasco, two freedom fighters here in the state of Missouri. So make sure you tune in because those interviews, especially with Representative Reich, she's a spark plug, and I'm sure you'll enjoy them. So we'll see you all next week. All right, and moving on. Go ahead and continue on with your thoughts, Robert, because now we got all the time. I don't have to cut anymore.
Excellent. So I've always thought that was quite ironic that Mark Levin would refer to neocons as the enemy within the right when he supports so much of the neocon agenda. And neocon is not just a slander. It's not just something like the way he uses it, just to attack anyone that you disagree with that claims to be conservative. A neocon, neoconservative, really, the new conservative, had their origins in the Democrat Party. And it was in 1972. In fact, this comes from Irving Kristol, prominent neoconservative, in his book, Neoconservatism, published in 1995, where he says, in 1972, the nomination of George McGovern signified that the Democratic Party was not hospitable to any degree of neoconservatism. Only a few of us drew the obvious conclusion that we would have to try to find a home in the Republican Party, but with every passing year, our numbers grew. And through the years, neoconservatives have largely taken over the Republican Party. And many of the prominent Republican talk show hosts support that same agenda. And so it's important to understand what this is about, that George McGovern being the nominee for the 72 presidential election and so on, that what was that made the neoconservatives feel like we can't be a part of the Democrat Party anymore? And what it was, 72, the hippie movement, the peace movement, and all of that, where neocons are warmongers. They are the ones that are the war hawks. And if you have any long history with understanding who Mark Levin is, during the years of George W. Bush, he was a huge defender of the war hawkishness of George Bush, promoting this idea of spreading democracy, for those who know what that word really means, spreading democracy around the world by using our troops, spreading it by the gun. That's a key to what a neoconservative is. And they trace their roots. This is quite interesting. In fact, let me pull up another quote here for you. Again, going back to Irving Kristol in his book on neoconservatism, he says, I regard myself lucky to have been a young Trotskyite, and I have not one bitter memory. And John Ehrman, The Rise of Neoconservatism, another prominent neoconservative, talking about the formation and creation of the neoconservatives and taking over the Republican Party. He says another important influence on neoconservatives was the legacy of Trotsky. In the framework of international communism, the Trotskyites were rabid internationalists rather than realists or nationalists. So it's a warmonger internationalist communist is what a Trotskyite is. And that's what a neoconservative is. They want to spread democracy around the world with military power. And that's their way of spreading international communism. Because if you've ever watched my lecture number 1 in my The Constitution is the Solution video series, it clearly shows, well known among those behind the scenes here, that democracy leads to, inevitably, to socialism, and socialism inevitably leads to communism. Therefore, people like Mao Zedong endorsed democracy. We want more democracy because we want more socialism. And so when you have a neoconservative out there spreading democracy around the world, what they're intentionally doing is spreading socialism, spreading communism. The history here is fascinating. We have to start with, and I'm assuming your audience at least understands this basically, that democracy is not a good thing, because that might have been a big leap for those that aren't familiar with that yet. But democracy, our founding fathers spoke of as the most vile form of government. And they intentionally created not a democracy, but a republic as they created the Constitution. Very different form of government. And we could spend so much time on this. I do recommend go on to YouTube and look up The Constitution is the Solution. You can get a lot more of the detail here. Lecture 1 goes into the dangers of democracy, understanding what democracy really is, and how it is endorsed by those who ultimately want global, international communism. It's a tool of that agenda, of what we often call today the deep state. That's really their objective, spreading democracy to lead to international, globalist communism. Anyway, that's kind of a deep dive into, kind of quickly, into what a neoconservative is. You'll never hear that from Mark Levin. They'll call out the neocons all the time. I'm quoting the neocons here. Irving Kristol, John Ehrman, and others. These are prominent neoconservatives telling us what they're all about. Quite interesting, isn't it?
Well, what I was going to say is, you talk about socialism and communism. I work with a gentleman who his family is from Romania, and they live here in the States now. Now he lived there under Ceausescu, and he says now that he lives here in the U.S., when he hears these college students talking about, oh, well, communism is a better system than what we have now, he goes, I just want to strangle them. He goes, it makes me so mad, he said, because when that guy would drive through our town, he goes, we were put on shifts to hold his picture up outside as he came through town. And he goes, so we all had to take turns. And he said if you weren't out there and he knew that anybody in your family wasn't out there, then you were going to jail. And you had to have pictures of him hung almost in every room of your house. All these different things. And he said, I hear these kids now trying to convince me and other people that communism is the way to go. And it just hasn't been done right yet. He goes, I just want to smack him in the forehead with something. And, he said it's insulting to people like me who lived through it, especially his parents, because now here's one thing that he mentioned to me that I never thought of, Robert. He said when he was a kid, he never saw an overweight person. He never saw a disabled person. He never saw anybody who was crippled, because those people were done away with. Everybody needed to be able to work for the state. And so if you couldn't do that, you were useless to the state, and they did away with you. So he said when we came to the States and I would see overweight people, black people, someone with a physical or mental handicap, he goes, me and my sister were like, what's wrong with these? Why are these people here? What's the deal? Now, I don't remember what age he was when he moved over here, but he said he and his sister were blown away by seeing all these different types of people, because in Romania, you did not see that. Now, I have a question from the somebody, Tom Martz, who's our Missouri State Constitution specialist here. He asked if you are familiar with the Jural Assemblies movement.
Jural Assemblies. I've heard of several different groups that are along the lines of what sounds like that. I don't know that specific organization.
Okay. And I want to ask you one more thing before we go on. Because I'm looking at your page here. Let me pull it up where everybody can see it here. Why? Okay, whatever. Why is it? Okay, now I'm going to get mad. But anyway, over here, folks, you can see the lectures here. The Constitution is the solution. And you said there's 6 of them, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. My question for you is, would you mind at some point, especially this first one, The Dangers of Democracy, maybe one week, I will just play the audio, that full first lecture on a show, and just let it roll the whole show and give my thoughts afterwards, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I just kind of wanted to ask because I thought, because that word democracy gets thrown around all the time now because, they're a threat to democracy. And I'm like, great, because democracies suck anyway. So, yeah, let's do away with it. I mean, as long as we don't move to socialism, we can move back to a constitutional form, constitutional republic. I'm cool with that. Down with democracy. But that'll probably get me nailed on YouTube. I don't care. But, yeah, I'll play that at some point, folks, because I think that'd be, I know my audience gets it, but there may be people in radio audience and stuff that don't quite understand why democracy and its true meaning is so dangerous. So it would be good for people to hear that.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I am going to have someone on the 14th of April from what is it, Informed Jurors Association or something like that, to literally, all we're going to spend the whole show on is jury nullification, because I'm trying to get people to understand how, we talk about nullification on a state level, but how you as an individual can nullify a law that's unconstitutional or immoral just as a juror, and deciding that you're not going to, deem someone guilty because they supposedly broke this arbitrary law and there's no victim involved, that you can nullify that at a jury trial. And I want people to really, really understand this issue. So I'm happy that she's going to come on with me and talk about that.
I'm guessing that's probably FIJA, F-I-J-A, Fully Informed Jury Association.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. That is one of the things that the founders wanted to make sure was part of the Constitution, was the right to a jury of your peers, because they have the right to say no to a bad law, even if you violated the law. And that is the ultimate nullification in the hands of the people, is to just say, no, this law is horrendous, we're not going to enforce it. I think you mentioned you're going to also post a link to my latest nullification video, which we go into a lot of history of state nullification level, which is a separate level of nullification. But the jury, that's a very important one for us to understand our role as jurors. Honestly, I love the opportunity. It was delightful for me to be able to be part of a jury and to work with a team who were just honestly looking to understand the truth and defend it. In this case, it wasn't someone in violation of a law. It was a civil situation where there was one person suing the other for a fraudulent issue. But our role as a juror, it might be inconvenient, but it is so important that we take that role seriously and seek to do our best to help maintain a degree of justice within our judicial system.
Yeah, I mean, it's as time goes on, if people don't learn, they don't understand their duties as a free people, and we keep losing freedoms. I mean, that's one of the last bastions we have right now. You know, you have nullification at the state level, but then you also have nullification at the sovereign individual level. And people need to understand that just because someone made a law doesn't make it right, doesn't make it just, doesn't make it moral or constitutional, and that you have a duty to nullify that, because at some point you may wish that you had somebody there fighting for you in a jury trial. You've broken some arbitrary law, and you're going to want somebody there to say this is ridiculous and we shouldn't be throwing someone in a cage for something, this asinine, this dumb. So, what, and that's who Tom was talking about, the Fully Informed Jury Association. That's who he was speaking of. So her name's Kristen. I don't know how to spell or pronounce her last name. It could be Tynan. It could be Tienan. It's Tynan. But I will have her on April 14th. I guess that's another video I'm going to have to play at some time, is on one of my shows, the your video nullification, the rightful remedy, and play that audio as well, just for people to comprehend this and come to grips with it. Because, like I said, not saying, folks, that, when you're in a room with 12 people and you're the only one that's in dissent, that it's easy, but, doing the right thing, it's really never that easy a lot of times. So,
in that case, the judge will try to pressure you. You can't have a hung jury. Yes, you can. You can.
Absolutely. There is no laws against hung juries. But I have heard of organizations standing outside of courthouses, passing out pamphlets on jury nullification, and law enforcement showing up and running them off, saying you can't do that. It's like there is no law against a peaceful assembly outside of a courthouse and passing out pamphlets on jury nullification. I am not aware of a law that would, prohibit that. I don't know if there is a state out there. Maybe there is, but I'm not aware of one.
Yeah, it's possible. They can make laws on any absurd thing they want to, I suppose, and get away with it, whether it's legitimate, whether it's right or not. That's one of the problems we have, is legislators on the national and state level will pass laws that are unjust, that are really in violation of our rights. One of the first things that I like to cover in the concept of understanding the Constitution is what it's there for. In the Declaration of Independence, it talks about that governments that to secure these rights, governments are instituted. After it talks about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and all that, the purpose of government is to secure our God-given unalienable rights. And really, anytime they step outside of that role and try to do anything else, what they're doing is really an illegitimate practice for a government to be involved in. Their sole purpose is merely to protect our rights.
Yeah, I mean, and again, Robert, we've got such a fight on our hands. It's one of those things where educating people to understand that their rights are natural and they are not given to us by government. They are not handed down from some bureaucrat. They are natural. From the day you were born, you have these natural rights. They're inalienable, and they are, what's the word I'm looking for? Enumerated in the Constitution. But the Constitution doesn't even give you those rights because they were natural before the Constitution was written. And getting people...
you have to keep in mind the Ninth Amendment. The Ninth Amendment says just because we listed some of the rights doesn't mean there aren't others. And that was one of their concerns in creating a Bill of Rights. The moment we start listing rights, we're not going to be able to list them all, and we can't have people just assuming that if it's not there, you don't have it. Because obviously, for example, the Bill of Rights doesn't mention anything about a right to marriage. I don't have a constitutionally protected right to marriage, but I still have the right to marry. And it's not in the federal jurisdiction. And we could go down this rabbit trail. Wow.
Yeah.
Just using it as an example. But when it comes to federal jurisdiction, the Supreme Court and Congress have no authority to define what marriage is or is not. The Supreme Court never should have passed any kind of decision on what marriage is. The Congress never had the authority to do what we lovingly call the Disrespect for Marriage Act. It's not in their authority. It's not an enumerated power. It's not in the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court or Congress. And so, yes, there are many rights beyond what's listed in the Bill of Rights. That's what the Ninth Amendment says. Just because we listed some doesn't mean there aren't others.
Yeah, the fact that, people wanted the state involved, like Grant said, the state should not be involved in marriage. People, that's the thing, some people have to come to grips with, too. They're like, well, how did we get here? Because people demanded it. People demand.
Yep.
Now, the government could create the problem, but then the people go to government and demand that they fix the problem. It's like, no, that's not the way it's supposed to work. They're the idiots in charge. They screwed it up.
Yeah. That knee-jerk reaction of there ought to be a law.
Oh, God. Don't get me started.
We've got to stop that mentality. There ought to be a law. Every time we say that, you have to ask yourself, are you willing to kill for that to be enforced? Because that is the only power, ultimately, that government has. That if you pass a law and someone violates the law, and then you come to try to force them to obey that law and they refuse or whatever, ultimately the power they have to enforce is a bullet. Are you willing to kill to enforce that view? And if we viewed laws in that regard, I would hope that people would recognize maybe we need to have a lot fewer laws. Because ultimately the only power government has is the power of force and to kill.
Yeah, henceforth the word, to enforce a law, the word force is in there. So you have to have force behind that law, and again, that can lead us down so many rabbit holes when you're talking about taxation and all these things. There was a guy that I heard one time talking about laws and things like that, and he said, talking about libraries and things. He's like, I don't mind libraries, but he said when the library is enforced through the barrel of a gun, that's where I have problems because they take your tax money to build these public libraries. Therefore, there is a gun behind that law because if you don't pay your taxes, someone with a gun shows up to confiscate property, throw you in jail, whatever. So,
That's right.
So Tom Mart says there ought to be a hanging tree and a rope outside every Capitol building. Whew, spicy.
Just to remind us what they're really about. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
One of my favorite quotes from one of my least favorite people, Matt Stone, says simply, political power comes from the barrel of a gun. That defines it. That's really what political power is. Political power comes from the barrel of a gun. And he, more than anyone in recent memory, used that barrel of a gun against his own people.
Oh, and then Grant says, don't forget the tar and pillow factory next door, too. So we got that, as well. So many spicy people in the live stream chat tonight. God, you guys are on fire tonight. That's the great thing. I love my audience because out of all the times, all the live streams I've done, Robert, now the guy hasn't showed up this week, but 2 weeks in a row, we've had a gentleman show up in a live stream, and he's definitely leftist, and he's posing these questions in the live stream. And the first week, I kind of answered him towards the end of the recording, and then last week, I finished the recording and then kind of went into his questions a little bit, but it got really twisted last week because he was saying that he was against like the SAFE Act, what we're trying to get done here in Missouri to end the hormone therapy, the puberty blockers, and the mangling surgeries, and he just didn't understand why we would want to do that. And I have to give him credit on one thing because he is one of the few people that I've ever come across on the internet that when you disagree with him, that he didn't name call, he didn't do any of those things. Now he was trolling a little bit, but he didn't retort, or he didn't go to the normal name callings. Oh, you're fascist, you're this or that. He never did any of that. So I have to give him credit on that. But it got a little creepy last week, and he's not in here tonight. And I told some of the guys, or I told one guy's like, you know, if I'm having a great conversation with someone and the live chat's really flowing, I don't catch all the comments. So I'm like, if you see this dude say some really awful stuff, just hide him or block him or whatever. I got a couple of admins in the stream just to block out unnecessary stuff, because I don't want somebody viewing that and then seeing that disgusting stuff. I'm all about free speech, but at some point it's like, now this is getting perverse and kind of just nasty.
It's also a matter of what are you wanting to bring forward in your channel.
Yeah.
Because this is your house, basically. You know, so
Ugh.
we can invite who we want to your house. We can invite certain conversations. We can talk about the things we want to talk about here.
Absolutely.
But,
and, you know, I I appreciated that he behaved himself for the most part, and he didn't resort to those tactics, because I'm like, here we go. Actually, what I was waiting for. I felt like it was almost being baited into saying something nasty, so then he could report it to YouTube, and the YouTube like, oh, we're pulling your video because you used violent language in your. So I kept myself under control, and I don't know, maybe he gave up. I don't freaking know.
Yeah.
But
I have to say,
go ahead.
When I'm doing presentations on the Article 5 convention topic, I love it when you can get someone that's really pretty knowledgeable from the other side of the argument to give some pushback or something like that, because that's when it gets fun. That's when it gets really interesting. If they become angry and they turn to ad hominem personal attacks and things like that, that just kind of destroys their whole position. And yeah, I don't mind if they take themselves down like that. It just makes them look like a fool. But if they can maintain their composure and actually and articulately defend their side, it gets really interesting. So I always hope if we can get some opposition, let's get some that's intelligent, that can be respectful in their disagreement, and let's discuss things back and forth. I think everyone benefits in that environment. Unfortunately, that's all too rare. That anymore, people just tend to start doing personal attacks or worse. But yeah, let's have a discussion of opposing views and compare them. Let's bring evidence. Let's bring facts and figures and other things like that. I love that.
Yeah, because I
think everyone learns more.
Oh, they absolutely do, because then you hear, you hear passionate yet kind of informed debate, because it turns into like when you turn on. Well, I don't, because I don't want to listen to my brain cells kill themselves. But if you listen to, like, if you get on Fox or CNN where they have their panels and all it is people screaming over the top each other, there is no information in there. You're watching a circus. And I just remember before I awakened, thanks to a couple friends who run MOLibertyRadio.us, before they kind of woke me up, I remember kind of being that person. I didn't have facts to back me up. I was regurgitating what I heard and what I thought was correct, and good Lord, was I wrong. But I was that same person, and I don't enjoy talking to people like that anymore if they can't bring anything to the table. Now, I might have a general conversation, but to get into a political discussion, because I've got people that I work with, if they see, there's a couple really, really liberal people that I work with. Now, mind you, not a fan of Trump, but if they see something Trumpish, they're apoplectic. If they're going to have a nuclear meltdown right there, they come in, the guy's just like, oh, I saw a big old let's go Biden thing on a jacked up truck. And he's just kind of like, you could have just, yeah, okay, the guy had a sticker, you don't like it, but you come in the plant and you're complaining, and the guy you're complaining to thinks it's hilarious. You're not.
You want to put your arm around him and say, show me where that bad bumper sticker hurts.
Get one of those dolls and say, point to the doll, point to the doll where the that nasty Trump
where the
lover.
bumper sticker hurt you. Yeah.
Oh, I'd
that's
get
hilarious.
fired in a heartbeat. But it would be funny.
I have to admit, I've had a few times where I've had some public debates on this Article 5 convention topic. Just over a year ago, I got to debate the two legislative bill sponsors in Utah, the House and Senate. And it was a gentleman's debate. We disagreed. We did so gentlemanly. We left as friends. They left before the debate was over because they weren't doing well. But but just the same, it was very friendly. And why can't we do that? As long as people on both sides of whatever the issue is can bring an intelligent argument and argue their position without resorting to personal attack. There's an old saying, when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. Unfortunately, that's all too often the case. They start personal attacks when they can't defend their argument.
Yeah, my friends call that the showstopper because, if say you're watching a debate and someone starts calling out, oh, well, they're racist or homophobic or whatever, all it does is try to shut the minds of a certain amount of people in the crowd because they don't want to be called a racist if they support you, so they instantly pull back. And they won't listen to your side of the story anymore because, I don't want to listen to this racist or homophobe or whatever, this fascist. I don't want to be I don't want anybody to think that I, am with him, so I'm just... And they pull themselves back, and it's like, if your skin is that thin, you shouldn't even be part of this debate. You shouldn't even be viewing it. And if you have one side of the aisle name calling, that should tell you right there they run out of facts. There was a debate between Jordan Peterson and this other guy. I can never remember his name. He's a race baiter, plain and simple. And they're on a debate stage, and he calls Jordan Peterson an angry white man. He's like, "Why you so mad, bruh?" And I'm thinking, you're on a debate stage, and you're talking like that. And then Peterson just proceeds to just disrobe him in front of he just tears him apart in his intellectual way that he always does. But he just shreds the guy. But I'm thinking, if I'm in the audience and I hear this guy say that, then he's making it personal, and he doesn't have a stake in the game anymore. That's the type of person that I start tuning out, because I can see that the logic train ran off the tracks a while back, and the whole thing's, there's cars thrown about and bodies laying everywhere, but the truth is not to be seen. Those are the type of people that I tune out, and here's the thing. It made me uncomfortable to watch that, because I'm like, what are you doing? You're up here on a debate stage, and you're resorting, and you could tell that's his tactic when he's in that realm, and people are throwing back against him, that he resorts to that. And I'm thinking, well, this guy's supposed to be a scholar and everything else, and I'm like, far be it from me to say that I'm a intellectual and I have this big vocabulary, but that didn't sound scholarly at all. I'm like, if that's the scholar you're looking up to, good luck with your education. Good grief.
Yeah. In the debates I've been in where that happens, where they turn to personally attacking me, I just smile, and I repeat that quote I shared a moment ago. When the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser.
Oh.
Now that you're attacking me personally, are you telling me that you're surrendering and admitting defeat? Because if we can't stick to the topic and debate the topic, we have to turn to personal attack. Without knowing it, maybe you're admitting you've already lost. And that either makes them more angry, or on some occasions I have people say, "I'm sorry, I know I got out of hand there, got a little too passionate." That's fine. Let's get back on track, and we can continue. But call them out for it, and politely, I'm sorry to see you backing out of the debate so early here. You're surrendering, admitting defeat.
Whew. That's really good, Robert. I mean, that's.
I found that's effective. Yeah.
I had never heard that quote before. That is fantastic. I'm gonna have to remember that. I'm gonna have to jot that one down to keep that one in the old Rolodex of. I mean, I don't ever debate.
Yeah.
I'm not the type of guy. I'm not well versed enough in anything to ever debate someone. The only type of people that I would debate are the big government people, because they always seem to bring out the same old points over and over again, and those are pretty easy to tear down. But if I had to, again, not well versed enough in any one main subject where somebody would be like, "Hey, you want to debate so and so?" and be like, "I don't think that would be good for me. I'm going to look like an absolute fool." Now, I know the Libertarian Party's having a convention in May, and someone came to ask me to speak because they're used to people coming to the Libertarian Party from the conservative side of the aisle, and they're not used to people coming to that mindset from the left like I came from. I came from the Democrat side, so they're actually bringing me in to say, yes, the loony libs have a lot that we don't, there's a lot of things we don't have in common, but there are a couple few issues that you can work with them on that we all agree on, like, maybe loosening up on the drug war, and because that's an abject failure, things like that. So there are some things that you can work on to make people more free. And I was like, yeah, I can talk about that. That's fine. I'll be scared as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, but I'll give it a whirl. What have you? I got to ask you, Robert. I mean, I've done public speaking a few times, and it scares the bejesus out of me. I mean, do you find it easy to do that? I mean, you've done it several times. I mean, the more you do it, do you feel more at ease?
Yes, absolutely. I've done it countless times now. I have no idea how many public speeches I've given at this point. But I have to go back in time a little bit to maybe 15, 20 years ago, where I was terrified of public speaking. And so it is absolutely, the more you do it. There's another great quote, I don't know who said this one: "Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain." I think I can actually find that quote here pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because that's what I live by.
Yeah.
Because the more you do it, the more comfortable it becomes. I don't know. Maybe I can find this one here. I think I have it here. Yeah, there it is. No, I don't have who said it. It's not the quote. But you can find it. It is online. And somebody important said it. To me, it doesn't matter so much who the person was, that as much as this clear logic behind it. That when you push yourself a little, you start becoming comfortable with it. I did a number of years ago, actually helped start a Toastmasters club in Billings, Montana, when we lived there. And this one was Liberty Toastmasters. It was really for those who promote the ideas of liberty, coming together, having a place where we could practice publicly defending various political positions. It was neat. It was really fun. I got to compete in some Toastmasters speech competitions and such. It was a good experience.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
I get to the point now where I'll go to a room of 20 people or 200 people or 500 people. I don't think I've spoken to more than about 500 people in a room at a time. And it's fun. It's actually fun, especially as you're there live, seeing the people nodding their heads and following along. And you can get a feel and a bit of a connection with the audience where you can really tailor it to the audience that you're with at the time, which is why I don't script my speeches. I have key points that we're going to follow in a particular order, but every speech is different. And it's a lot of fun. As I give these presentations, I especially love to get to these points of, well, here's some clear evidence. Please, anyone in the room that supports the opposite side of this view, show me something to contradict it. Because either we have to concede that this that I've shown you is correct, and like we said in the first half of the show here, Mark Meckler is clearly lying about all these things, lie after lie after lie, endlessly. or I'm totally wrong on all these things, and someone can bring some evidence to show that. It's going to be one of those two. I enjoy doing that with an audience. You get to that point, and I'll pause. Anyone in the room? Is there anyone here that supports the convention movement and can counter this for me? Occasionally I'll get someone, but most of the time by that point, enough evidence has been brought forward that you've got pretty well 100% buy-in in the entire audience. So that's really fun. That's hard to get to, but that's a really fun objective.
Yeah.
Honestly, I get charged. It's energizing to me to get in front of a group, but I would much rather be teaching the Constitution than trying to defend it against this convention cause. Teaching the Constitution is so much more fun. To see people come alive with understanding, and the Constitution is brilliant. And as people begin to understand the absolute brilliance that went into so many aspects of it, it's amazing. It's so much fun to see that come alive in people.
Yeah, that's got to be damn amazing to. I mean, I haven't spoken in front of any like big crowds. I think the biggest one's like, God, 50, 60 people, and that was terrifying to me because I'm just not used to it. I mean, I've been doing podcasting for a few years, but up until then I hadn't had anybody like, hey, you want to come speak at my event? And it's like, are you sure you want that? Are you wanting to have this foolish sounding guy up in front of your audience trying to make a point? But it is what it is. It was a good learning experience.
You have a lot of knowledge of the principles of liberty and a lot of history and a lot of things that, given the opportunity to share the things that you're passionate about, that makes it easier.
Yeah.
You get to design what you want to talk about and bring forward things that you've been studying, you've been uncovering, and you just want to share with other people. That's where it becomes fun. That's where it becomes easy.
That is very true.
Give me topics that I'm not interested in. If I'm just in a speech class and they're giving me a topic to speak on that I have no interest in, that's mine though.
Yeah, it is. There's nothing worse than, it's like, having a job like I have now, and we have to go listen to people talk about something. I don't remember what one of them was, but basically it was about, you shouldn't, the descriptions are, words that you use about other people. And I was like, oh my God. So we got to a point where the guy's like, you shouldn't call people handicap. And he went into the history of the word and all this stuff. And I said, and I got tired of it. And I go, I said, because he goes, anybody got any questions or comments? I go, you're talking about the word handicap and why we shouldn't use it. I said, I would just about guarantee you that if you hadn't gone out and said these things and told handicapped people that it's offensive, I said they wouldn't know. And then I proceeded to say, how much do we have to change the language before the actual meaning or whatever we're talking about, if somebody has a disability or whatever, that you purify to a sense that nobody knows what the heck you're talking about anymore because you've bleached all the meaning out of it. You've torn it apart, and now nobody knows. George Carlin's got that great bit where he talks about PTSD as it started out with shell shock. Then it went to operational exhaustion and something else, and then post-traumatic stress disorder. And he said, maybe if we still called it shell shock, some of those Vietnam veterans would have gotten the help they needed because they just sanitized the language and dumbed it down. And some of these classes make me want to shove my head in the ceiling fan because it's like, why on God's green earth are you taking up my production time to tell me about things that I find utterly ridiculous? And you're just
anymore. We can't even define what a woman is. So
that's true.
Language is becoming meaningless.
Yeah, because neither one of us are biologists, so we can't define a woman. Yeah. I don't even want to go down that road either.
Boy, we could open up another hour here.
Well,
I'm actually going to need to head out shortly here.
Yeah, I was going to end it because I was going to say there's a podcast that I absolutely love called Good Morning Liberty, and it's two guys host a show, and they talk about a lot. I mean, they talk about some things going on in states, but they talk a lot of federal issues. But when they tear things down, when they go into detail, it's just hilarious because they have this camaraderie between them, and so they're firing back and forth. And when they get into these topics of the transgender thing and the sexes and all this stuff, the way they say it, I'm sitting in my car, I'm driving down the road, and if there's traffic around me, people probably think that I finally lost it, and because I'm laughing hysterically because the way you'll say something about a woman, and they'll be like, well, we don't really know what a woman is because neither one of us are biologists and things of that nature, and I just I really get a kick out of it. Well, Robert, let me ask you this before we go. Are there some like Federalist papers that are your favorites? Let's say some Federalist papers that you really enjoy discussing and talking about. Do you have something like that?
Oh, I certainly do. It kind of depends on the topic, but when it comes to reining in the federal government, getting us back on track, the number one most important is Federalist 46. Okay. James Madison talks about how to push back. He talks about the powers that states have to nullify. He talks about the powers that we, the people, have as well to use our influence to get our congressmen and others on track and following the Constitution. It's a great one. And interestingly, as he's talking about this deep topic of how to rein in the government when they are violating the Constitution, he never mentioned changing the Constitution with an Article 5 convention. Wonder why? Well, partly because in Federalist 48 and 49, he says that's exactly the wrong thing to do when the federal government's violating the Constitution. You don't want to have a constitutional convention or convention of states as they prefer when to rein in a government violating the Constitution. He says that's a foolish idea. So, yeah, Federalist 46, that one's my favorite when it comes to how to rein in an out-of-control government. And honestly, right now, that's the one we need most.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the reason I asked is I got an open door policy for you, Robert, because I really enjoy having you on. So if there's a topic that comes to mind sometime down the road and you've got a lot of information to go with it, get in contact with me. We'll figure out a date. I'll have you back on and we can go into great detail because I learn just like everybody else does. I'm learning this because I'm still quite ignorant on the facts. So, yeah, you have a date in mind or something, you have a topic you really want to delve deep into, let me know, and I'll be happy to have you back on.
Awesome. Thank you. It's always good to be with you.
Yes, thanks again, Robert, for taking time out for me, and have a great weekend, man.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, Robert Brown. I always enjoy having Robert on. Robert just makes learning fun as far as the Constitution. 'Cause, again, I'm still ignorant on it. I learn every time he comes on. We learn things. We discuss cool things. And Robert, we got Robert Brown, we got Tom Martz, and you can get them on. You can talk about the Constitution. They can just bring it up, spit it out, and that they're not lying to you, or they're not, misleading you or misrepresenting the context of the Constitution or anything like that. So I always enjoy having those guys on. Tom, I got to have you back on soon too, brother. I am booked out till the middle of April, but then things start opening back up. So I have you back on again sometime in the near future. With that being said, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. And again, I want to remind everybody that this, let me pull up the, because Senator Eigels, L.A., Sherry actually texted me the other day because she sent me a text. I'm like, nothing personal, but who is this? So the rally and filibuster watch. Let me get the picture up here. Monday, March 20th at 2 p.m. at the Capitol Rotunda. Missouri Kids First Rally. This is Stop the Medical Transitioning of Our Kids. So, again, if you want to be a part of this at the Rotunda this coming Monday, again, our very own Catherine Dreyer will be there talking about why libertarians are against the mangling of kids. Why most of them are and why you should be. So Catherine will be there speaking in the Rotunda. I don't know if she's going to be the first speaker or what, but I know it is at 2 o'clock at the Rotunda at the Capitol this Monday, March the 20th. So I will not be able, I wish I could go. I'd like to go there just see what Catherine has to say. Because Catherine's just, a really cool person. Salt of the earth. But anyway, so if you want to be a part of that, if you want to go check that out this coming Monday at 2 o'clock at the Rotunda for the rally. Also, don't forget, if you haven't checked out KEYK, you can find them at keygatheringplace.com, or I believe it's keyradio.live. Make sure you go there. You'll find the links in the description down here. Also, don't forget to check out MOLibertyRadio.us, especially on Sunday nights, 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time. Sam and Trish Britton, Off the Cuff Radio. Also, the Missouri Freedom Initiative. Check out their Odyssey channel. You can find a link in the description. They have their live streams on Saturday evenings at 7:30 Central Time. And then, last but not least, don't forget to check out our sponsor at slaphappybeverage.com. That's slaphappybeverage.com. So thanks again to all of you who joined me on the live stream tonight. If you hang out for a minute after I stop recording, we can chat for another moment or two. But with that, again, next week will be Representative Cherie Tolson Reich. And then the following week will be Representative Tony Lavasco. So I look forward. I just cannot wait till next Friday because Cherie is a firecracker. She's a spark plug, and I enjoy our conversation. So looking forward to those two interviews. And then again, April 7th, we have Patrick Holland from the Missouri Freedom Initiative. And then the 14th, Kirsten from Fully Informed Jurors Association will be joining me to talk jury nullification. Make sure you do not miss that one because that one, I hope to God, it should be a fantastic, fantastic show. But again, with that, let's end the show. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you all next Friday right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.
Want more freedom? It starts with you. Join us next week on the Missouri Liberty Report and find out how you can get involved to take back your state.
All right, thanks everybody for joining in with me tonight. Again, Robert's always a great guest. Enjoy him. And I also have links down here in the description to his videos. And at some point, I will probably play audio from a couple of those videos to just so everybody can hear them, that my audience can listen to them. The first in the Constitution is the solution video, which is called The Dangers of Democracy. And then the other one, which is, Nullification, the Rightful Remedy, which you can find on Rumble. Might have to play that audio at some point and let that play out because we want people to really understand nullification. But again, folks, it was great seeing you all. Lively chat. And I appreciate each and every one of you and your continuing support for this live stream. So Gary, Ride, Voodoo Queen, Wilderness Gal, Tom Martz, Grant, Sam I Am, Catherine Dreyer was in here. We had Timmy Chonga was in here. Who else? Ganai, Hunter the Parmesan cheese expert. So all those wonderful folks showed up tonight and had a lot of great comments, and you guys are in there communicating back and forth, and I appreciate all of it. So with that being said, folks, again, have a great rest of your Friday night. I'm going to work tomorrow, so yay me. And again, we'll see you all next Friday with Representative Cherie Tolson Rice. Should be fantastic show. Peace out, everybody.